Well, as you know now, if you didn't know before, I will retire on July 1st from my role as senior rabbi. Like many of you, I have some questions. Some are logistical, like, where will I put myself? I have taken over my son Ari's bedroom and turned it into a home office. Will that be my default place to sit and read and write? Or will it be important for me to have a place out of the house, perhaps the reading nook of the new CBB library? As I have said many, many times already, I plan to do a lot of hiking and traveling and take classes in art and music and so on, but on a typical day, when I just want to sit and read, what will be my place? That is an important logistical question. Another question is more existential. What will be my purpose? The last time I asked that question without knowing the answer, I was 20 years old, 47 years ago. I was a junior in college, feeling bewildered, struggling to choose a career path. I was home in Rochester, New York for Thanksgiving, and I went to consult my rabbi. We went to lunch, and I asked him what Judaism says about our purpose here on earth. Emerging from that conversation, I had decided that my purpose in this world was to become a teacher of Judaism. For the past 47 years, that purpose has been my North Star. I have had other important and meaningful responsibilities, like being husband to Marion, and father to Rachel and Ari, and son to my mother and father, and brother to my siblings, but my primary identity, my work, my purpose on this earth has been to teach Judaism. Now what? That question is both terrifying and exhilarating. I feel an empty space opening at the center of my life. An empty space that is alive with possibility and with uncertainty, like a sudden silence in the middle of a conversation. For a Jew, empty space is bound up with the sacred. The Kabbalists, the Jewish mystics, spoke of the Halal HaPanui, the evacuated space, which God opened up at the beginning of creation. Shabbat is an empty space, a time of rest and reflection, of doing nothing, just being at the heart of our week. The ancient tabernacle, the dwelling place of the divine presence, was an elaborate structure built around an empty space at the center. That empty space was the whole point. In giving the instructions for the tabernacle to Moses, God says about that empty space, I will meet you there, and I will speak with you in that empty space, above the ark, between the two cheruvim. When we study together and allow ourselves to ask a question to which we truly do not know the answer, that question creates an empty space for God to enter. I feel an empty space opening at the center of my life. Let me share with you a few ways I experienced that. 45 years ago, for the past 45 years, whenever I have entered into Jewish prayer, I have found myself thinking, what is the meaning of this prayer? How could I translate this prayer into language that my congregation can embrace? There have been many times that I felt the presence of God while praying, and often, very often, Those moments led immediately to the question, how can I share this with my students? Soon, that question will no longer be at the forefront of my mind. What will it feel like to pray without the rabbi in my head taking notes and planning the next lesson? An empty space is opening in my life. Here's another example. I try to go hiking every week on my day off on one of the front country trails, Cold Spring, Rattlesnake, Romero, San Isidro, or if I have more time, down into Blue Canyon or in the back country of the San Rafael Wilderness. Those hours alone with the wildflowers and the lizards, the rocks and the cool streams have been healing and inspiring for me. But it never takes long for the rabbi in my head to pipe up with, could we get the 8th and 9th graders out here? Would that be a good place to gather and tell a story? Hey, could we make learning the Santa Barbara wildflowers part of the Nitivot curriculum? Bringing together Judaism and wilderness has been a major theme for the last 12 years of my life. Now I wonder, what could it be like to go out into the wilderness without the rabbi in my head? An empty space is opening in my life. And here is one more important example. For the past 8 years, I have spent many hours, almost every day, thinking about the Building Dreams project, thinking about how to redesign and make the most of our CBB building, about how we can use our outdoor spaces, about what Shabbat might look like once we come back to campus, thinking about our education program and how our building can be a place for experiential learning for our kids and adults, and thinking about how to tell the story, how to describe the vision to all of you, guiding and pushing forward the project to make our temple new again and ready for the next 100 years has been, in some ways, the culmination of my rabbinic career. Very soon, I will have nothing to say about what happens in the building. I had better have nothing to say. Because if I do express an opinion, I will quickly go down in CBB history as the Rabbi Emeritus from hell. For the past 20 years, my days have been filled with passionate, creative, immensely productive thinking, speaking, doing with many of you here today. Together, we have been building a house of living Judaism that has been and will continue to be CBB's mission. But for me, as Rabbi Emeritus, a difficult but sacred silence is coming. An empty space is opening at the center of my life. I know that it will be difficult. After more than 40 years, the rabbi in my head is not going to just stop talking. I will be turning to meditation, to prayer, psychotherapy, to help me manage that voice. Not to shut the rabbi in my head down completely, but to manage him, to help him grow quiet. I want and need the empty space that is opening in the center of my life. I don't want to shut the rabbi in my head down completely. I cannot imagine taking off my life's purpose like an old coat and hanging it up in the closet. My retirement contract says that I will become Rabbi Emeritus. I'm thinking hard about what that means. I've been thinking about role models, both in my own life and in Jewish history, of community leaders who have relinquished their leadership and moved into a next phase. Most are not very helpful. Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk, one of the most brilliant and creative Hasidic teachers of the 19th century spent the last 20 years of his life in almost complete isolation, emerging from his room only rarely to scream at his students, "You are all liars!" That's a true story. 20 years, he would come out occasionally and yell. He is not my role model. Maybe a little bit. Moses, at the end of his life, he was 120 years old. One of only 3 men in his whole generation who were still alive, and he was not ready to retire. He begged God to allow him to continue to live and to lead until God finally said, "Moses, stop it. I don't want to hear any more." The closest I have to a role model for retirement is my own father. He was for many years Senior Associate Dean for Medical Education at the University of Rochester Medical School. My dad was a beloved physician and teacher and led that school through an important period in the school's history. In retirement, he gave up his big, beautiful office in the center of the medical school and was moved to a small office down a quiet corridor. He wrote 2 books about his mentors. He continued to read electrocardiograms because his experienced eye still caught things that the computer missed. And the thing that he enjoyed most was a class that he was invited to teach every year to the first-year medical students. He taught the students how to conduct an intake interview with a new patient. It was a class in bedside manner. Even in retirement, my dad never stopped being a doctor, and he never stopped teaching. That's my role model. After this year, like my dad when he retired, I will no longer be a leader and builder of this institution. That is the vast, empty space which is opening up. But I think I will continue to be a teacher of Judaism, sharing the Torah that has become so much of who I am, telling stories to the kids, teaching some adult ed. That would be enough. The other day, I was walking around the construction site of our Building Dreams project with our old friend Tom, who was visiting from out of town. Tom just retired from his job as home builder. As we walked through, admiring the new structures taking shape, the new concrete that has been poured and the stunning steel structure of the new shade canopy, Tom commented to me, "Just think, Steve, you are leaving this legacy for the next 100 years or so." And then he added, "Of course, eventually someone is going to tear it down." Thank you, Tom. I mean it. That is true. The building is going to be beautiful and will provide a magnificent home for our communal life for many decades to come. And a time will come when a future generation will tear it down and build a new synagogue or something else, or our building will become a house for all peoples and all religions, or who can see that far? Nobody. But Tom is correct. Nothing lasts forever. And that truth helps me relax. Every morning when I stand in my backyard and pray, I thank God for each of my family members, for my health, for our miraculous planet Earth, and for my job, which has given me so many years of work with purpose. I cannot imagine any work that would have been more meaningful. I am beginning to get some sense of what comes next after July 1st. a new chapter of my life in which I can pray without taking notes and can hike in the canyons without planning the next outdoor education lesson and can come to our new building and just enjoy it, sitting with friends out among the trees, under the mountains, and chatting, or singing, or quietly sitting, without judging, without worrying about whether we are doing the right thing with our space. I can imagine the voice of the rabbi in my head growing quieter and quieter. I can feel a sacred, empty space opening in the center of my life. Gmar Chatima Tova. May we all be sealed in the book of life for a year of blessing, a year of good health, a year of love, and a year of peace. Shana Tova. Thank you so much for that piece. It really felt perfect. Thank you. Charles, was that you? Yeah, Charles wrote that. Thank you, Charles. It's gorgeous. Let me share with you the schedule from here on in. It's about 1:15, I've been told. Soon, maybe, should we say about half an hour? In about half an hour, our early afternoon options will begin. Here they are. Actually, let me get the notes so I get them right. First of all, in the lobby, okay, let me say what they are first. The first option is a conversation with Rabbi Daniel Brenner about anti-Semitism, specifically for parents of high schoolers. That's a group, a sub-community in our congregation that are really faced with some challenges in that area. So that's option number one. Parents of high schoolers with Dr. Rabbi Daniel Brenner. Still thinking about my dad. In the lobby outside the fellowship hall. Second option is a conversation, a sharing with Dr. Gary Linker, who is a wonderful therapist and counselor in our community. Gary, you want to raise your hand? Gary is going to be leading just a sharing on the topic of what is the shofar calling you to do this year? Just sharing what is the shofar calling you to do this year. Our third option is a conversation about Israel, Lebanon, Gaza, with Steve Zipperstein in this room. And Steve, there's Steve raising his hand. Steve is one of the most knowledgeable members of our congregation about what's happening in the Middle East. Extremely thoughtful, clear. I can't recommend it highly enough. If you feel like you don't want to be dealing with that stuff today on Yom Kippur, just don't be here during that time, okay? So those three options, the conversation for parents of high school students with Rabbi Brenner in the lobby. Oh, and the high schoolers are welcome also, not just their parents. Second is the conversation with Gary Linker, and that is going to be in the fellowship hall. And third is the conversation, the presentation and opportunity for Q&A with Steve Zipperstein in here. And then the fourth option, just announced, a surprise fourth option announced last night, the cantor is going to be leading a napping session. But he hasn't told us where that's going to be. So you have to kind of just follow your instincts and see where he might be. All right? That's the fourth session. We reconvene in here for the afternoon service at 3 o'clock. The Yizkor service will be at about 5:15, and Ne'ilah, the concluding service, will begin at about 6:15 with the final shofar blast at about 7 o'clock. After final shofar, we will do Havdalah in here, and then we'll move outside for break the fast. So with that, since this is my last opportunity, I just want to say one last thing that I like to say at this time of day on Yom Kippur, which is that many people say, I'm going to fast until I get really hungry. I think that's when the fast begins. So I will wish you an easy fast, if it's not easy, may it be a heartbreaking fast. And a Gemar Chatima Tova. May you be sealed in the book of life for a wonderful new year. Amen.
Yom Te'am Senu.
Page.
It's the last page.
318. 318.